Hello, everyone. Welcome to the i4Trust welcome event and training camp. Let me share my screen. Uh, so my name is Juanjo Hierro. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of the FIWARE Foundation, also coordinator of the i4Trust program. Together with me, um, presenting this session is Rajiv Rajani, Chief Technology Officer of the iSHARE Foundation. And this first session will provide an introduction about the goals, the objectives of the i4Trust program and what i4Trust will be delivering as support for creation of data spaces. Experiments which were selected through the i4Trust second open call have been invited to this session, and I want to warmly welcome them. And yeah, I hope that we will be enjoying this session. Okay, so let me start with the general introduction about i4Trust. As I was already mentioning, i4Trust is aiming at providing a robust framework for creation of data spaces with the main goal of boosting the development of innovative services around new data value chains. The i4Trust program is not just providing the technology for doing so, the legal framework also, as we will see, that will help creation of such data spaces. Therefore, right tools to be able to create the data spaces that different participants may be willing to create, but is also providing education, coaching, and initial funding for some experiments that have been selected to test the framework and demonstrate the opportunities that data spaces are bringing. Data spaces created based on the i4Trust framework are enabling trustworthy and effective data sharing, as we will see, based on the exchange of digital twin data. And we are creating around this framework a vibrant ecosystem of collaborating SMEs and supporting DIHs, digital innovation hubs, that will be supporting the creation of these data spaces and the growth of these data spaces. But what is a data space, and what we are referring to data spaces? Well, data spaces are a cornerstone element of the European Union strategy for data, and they can be defined as a decentralized data ecosystem for sharing data that is built around commonly agreed building blocks. Building blocks, some of which are technology building blocks and covering three main pillars. On one side, data interoperability. So bringing a very concrete mechanism how all participants will exchange effectively data among themselves. The second pillar that has to do with ensuring sovereignty on data and trust, so that these exchanges among parties are based on a trust framework that ensure that the parties that you are exchanging data with are trustable, and also bringing the necessary mechanisms to enforce policies you want to establish on the data you own and how other participants will be accessing to it and even using it. Last but not least, still talking about technology building blocks. i4Trust, any data space, and of course, data spaces based on the i4Trust framework will bring components for data value creation, which are components easing the publication and discovery of data services and data service offerings, and also providing means how providers of data services will be able to monetize access to those data services. Last but not least, there will be also non-technological building blocks, like building blocks for governance, which comprise a number of business, operational, and organizational agreements that need to be set up in order to create any data space. We will come later with more details about building blocks on all these technology pillars and also these governance building blocks. And well, at operation of any data space, there will be different kind of actors involved. First of all, data and data service providers and the consumers of those data services. There will be trust anchor service providers who will be the entities providing those services to check the trustworthiness of the different actors involved in the interaction, identity and authorization service providers, and last but not least, marketplace broker providers that will implement the kind of data services, publication, discovery, and marketplace services that would be needed for creation of the value on data that is shared. Here there are some examples of data spaces in real life. For instance, data spaces on logistics, where a number of participants will be able to implement process together by means of sharing data each participant owns, and overall together creating processes along the value chain where they are participating in, as actors to, for instance, save CO2 or improve the handle time for goods they are delivering. There might be also data spaces connected to energy, for instance, protecting the data sovereignty while allowing energy saving services in buildings. And important as data spaces in general can be applicable to many different kind of domains, and even involve actors of different domains. And so to a great extent, being able to support processes across domains. And i4Trust, as we will see, is providing a complete framework that is not specifically linked to any concrete domain, but really suitable for multiple domains. The important thing in a motto in data spaces and in i4Trust is if we want to make data spaces happen, we have to make choices. That was indeed a common vision that FIWARE Foundation and iSHARE were saying when we decided to initiate this collaboration program. And actually, what i4Trust is about bringing together mature technology that's coming from iSHARE, from FIWARE, bringing and materializing the necessary components along with basic governance to create data spaces. So many people may be talking to you about data spaces as a concept, as an abstract element. We are making it happen. And we did it covering all the technology building blocks that I was introducing before, but also a number of governance building blocks. FIWARE providing, in the first place, open source implementation of components that participants in a data space may need to deploy in order to participate in data spaces they create. And iSHARE providing specifications as well as some services that would allow that need to be followed and used by the participants in order to support concretely a trusted exchange of data. FIWARE providing and covering components that are in the three pillars, but in the pillar of data sovereignty and trust, iSHARE providing the specs that FIWARE components are implementing and making that pillar also happen. Very importantly, and I want to insist on that, we do not only just cover technology components, we also bring a number of business agreements, operational agreements that participants willing to create data, organizations willing to create data spaces can adopt for creating those data spaces. And the interesting thing is all these agreements and frameworks that iSHARE is providing, having already tested, are mature and are being used in real data spaces at the moment. A bit an insight, an overview of what are the fundamental principles that are adopted in i4Trust in the vision how data spaces should be created is that in any data spaces there are a fundamental element that is that data consumers and data service providers are decoupled. They don't need to be known a priori, but it's important that anyways at both sides they should know how they can offer data so that this can be consumed, and on the other hand discover services and be able to consume them. And this requires from our perspective that all participants speak the same language. That meaning that data exchange API they use, the standard data models they also use, the vocabularies that they use in this data exchange, as well as the mechanisms for identity and access management has to be commonly adopted, should be concrete, based on standard is the vision in i4Trust, but needs to be defined for and be adopted by all participants in the data spaces. Besides that, it's important to incorporate as part of the global services that would exist linked to a given data spaces means for verifying participants. That is what we refer to as trust angle services, and means for trading services. And there is where we have the vision of data service marketplaces as well as publication services. iTrust focus on a concrete kind of data spaces, which are data spaces where participants are exchanging digital twin data, and all these frameworks for trusted anchor services and decentralized identity and access management, plus marketplaces services are components, are services that will be provided. I think it's also important that i4Trust is bringing now, as part of the second release of the i4Trust framework that will be available, for instance, to experiments that are part that have been selected in our second open call, but also available to projects that want to create data spaces today. we are providing the first framework that already already aligns with first results of the Dataspace Business Alliance technology convergence work. And what is the Dataspace Business Alliance? I think it's a very relevant initiative nowadays, helping to materialize the vision of data spaces in Europe, which was created by a number of associations that joined forces, which were the Big Data Value Association, the FIWARE Foundation, Gaia-X, and IDSA, the International Data Space Association. So the fact that i4Trust is bringing for the first time a framework that aligns with first results of this effort means that i4Trust is providing something that is future-proof, and those projects that are willing to use and start thinking how to design the data spaces of the future will have in i4Trust really a good and concrete mean how to materialize those data spaces. And as I said before, we make data spaces happen because we bring concrete technologies, concrete answers to what standards to adopt in the different building blocks, in technology building blocks, in the 3 pillars that I have been talking about. Here is a short summary of them in a nutshell, but I will not develop or elaborate on them right now because we will be going into the details in the following slides. We do not provide just technology in i4Trust. We are setting up a vibrant community, and to ignite this community, we are involving a number of experiments that cope with engage in more than 150 SMEs. And we are also engaging with a number of digital innovation hubs. So far, more than 40 digital innovation hubs are engaged in i4Trust. And with all these actors together, we are starting to create first reference of success stories using the i4Trust framework, and with the technology, training, technical support from both FIWARE Foundation and iSHARE, and a full-fledged i4Trust community platform that is provided by the third partner of this collaboration program, which is Funding Box. This is a summary of the i4Trust values, our DNA: trustworthiness, sovereignty, effectiveness in the data exchange, openness, because we really wish to provide a framework that allows you to avoid any sort of vendor lock-in, the general purpose aspect, so the ability to really create data spaces that work cross-domain, and with the intent to support innovation and growth. Let's now go one by one through the different pillars of the i4Trust framework. We will start with the technology building blocks, and in the first place, the data interoperability building block. I was mentioned that in i4Trust, we are providing a solid framework for the exchange of digital twin data. What do we mean by digital twins? We mean a digital replica of any asset. It might be typically assets connected to real world objects, physical objects that are, but might be also connected to anything that might be relevant to describe the state of what's going on in the real world. And those assets are characterized by attributes. Some of them are properties, some of them are relationships with other entities, and those attributes have value, some of them changing over time. sometimes very dynamically, in other cases, not that dynamically, but still changing, and in some cases, pretty static. All in all, these digital twin replicas are all together creating a holistic representation of the world that you are dealing with in your application, representing context. And what we are providing in i4Trust, and here is where FIWARE concretely is bringing in concrete standards, is the API that will be used by participants to exchange digital twin data. That is the NGSI-LD API that has is now being published, the specification by ETSI, the European Telecom Standard Institute, and together with that, smart data models that will help participants to establish common vocabularies to use. And these two aspects of standardization that are key to support interoperability, the NGSI API that is supported by one component of FIWARE, which is the context broker, and the data models are a concept that is work across any domain. It works for cities where the entities are the shops, the buses, the citizens, but also things that may not be connected to real world objects, like a claim that a given citizen may have opened for the city. But it's also a model, a concept, a vision that works in other domains like manufacturing, when we, of course, will be talking about other kind of entities, other kind of digital twin classes like the transport robots, the palletizers, operators, if we are talking about and a scenario that deals with warehouses, shop or shop floors. It works in agriculture, where, of course, again, the entities are different, but there might be some entities that may be relevant and common to multiple domains, like, for instance, weather is relevant for cities because maybe impacting traffic control, but weather is, of course, relevant for agriculture. So there are certain elements in this vision that are working cross-domain, and that's why it's important to identify standards for data exchange that work across domains and are applicable in hospitals or in energy. Going a bit more in detail in the two elements, the API and the data models, NGSI-LD, as we like to say, is a simple yet powerful API. Simple because it supports all the simple operations that any web developer would expect from a RESTful API, the ability to represent types, entities, attributes as a resource on which you can perform the standard get, post, put, patch, delete operation, but yet powerful because it will bring a number of powerful operations like geoquery, subscription notification, string injection, forwarding notification, multiple data renderings. I will not go into that detail because for that you have the training camp that is running in the afternoon, where today we will have a primer on NGSI-LD, and on Monday you will have a more dedicated session where we will be elaborating on all these advanced features. Smart data models is the second element. So we encourage participants of data spaces to rely on an initiative we call the Smart Data Models Initiative, which was launched by a number of organizations that are, you see there on the upper right corner, FIWARE Foundation on one side, IUDX, Open Agile Smart Cities, PM Forum, and other initiatives are initiatives we are in conversation with to join this effort. And here we are providing a set of resources in JSON, JSON-LD, how to map concrete data models that have already been tested in real projects and that will be offered to you public and royalty free, so that you just need to reuse them when creating your applications. these two elements, and I think it's important to just finalize, emphasize, and with this I finish this part, and are standards that and initiatives that have been endorsed by a number of organizations. ETSI, I mentioned, has been publishing the specifications of the NGSI-LD API. GSMA has adopted and not only the API, but also Smart Data Models Initiative as a recommendation for creating IoT-enabled big data systems, TM Forum as well. And very importantly, for instance, in domains like smart cities, these standards have been adopted globally and by initiatives in Europe, like that started in Europe, but then grow globally, like the Open Agile Smart Cities, but also IODX in India, to give an example. So with this, we move to the second pillar, data sovereignty and trust, and I leave the floor to Rajiv to continue the presentation. I will stop sharing so that probably you better share your own screen and control the slides. Rajiv?
Yes, I thought Gerard was going to present this. Gerard, are you able to join in? No.
I think Gerard is there. It's listed as a speaker, but yeah,
Okay.
I don't see him on the other hand. Should we start and you?
Yeah.
Okay. So whenever you are ready, you can
Yes.
share.
Let me share my screen.
Great. You need to put it in presentation mode.
Yes, I will put that. Yes. Good morning, everyone, and very warm welcome to the second round of mentoring program. Um, of course, Juanjo already gave the introduction, so let me continue quickly on to the second pillar of the building blocks that we are talking about. That is mainly about data sovereignty and trust, which is key in order to enable data sharing between organizations. So the principles that we enable and follow is basically with the proper and standardized identity and access control mechanisms provided by the framework, you are enabled to in a uniform way identify and authenticate other participants, and because of the trust anchor services, you are able to trust the identity and the legal aspects about that participant, that they have also agreed to the same legal agreements with you. Um, in that perspective, that gives you the trust that you need in order to exchange data in first place. Um, and that's more on the conceptual level. How do you enable that? And we use basically open standards like OpenID Connect, the distributed identifier, DID as it is called, COP, YDC, verifiable credentials, presentations, and for usage control, there is support for XSEML, and other languages like ODRL and others. Um, uh, that allows you to have defined what the other participants can do, and that is also covered via the legal means by means of data licenses. Um, the trust anchor enables, as you can see in the right bottom, which will have a better, deeper look later, is mainly about the role models, and you see there is a trust anchor which enables trust within the data space. Sorry. Yeah. So what is enabled within this pillar is, as I said, trustworthy identification, authentication, and authorization. And for enabling that in various forms, and what I'll support is given is basically when we see that there are usually two scenarios where machine to machine interaction is there, where servers talk to each other independently and they can be from different organizations, versus human to machine flow, where humans or employees or customers interact with your portal or app. In that sense, it is human to machine flow. So both aspects are considered and provided within this framework in a standard way. What is facilitated is, irrespective of which policy language you use, and how you determine certain authorizations and usage controls. The flexibility is provided in terms of how you exchange that information by defining a standard API interface for that. And this allows you to have, from coarse grained to fine grained authorizations given to participants, um, as and flexibility in terms of where these authorizations are stored. So data owners can choose where they want to keep their authorizations for their data, and it is not locked down to a particular application or server or platform or a particular organization in that manner. Portable identities. Since we enable human to machine flows, and we don't want to get in the same position as we currently are, in the sense that every application that you want to use, or every on the web or on your mobile apps, you need to create a login account in those portals. But with this framework, what is enabled is you can reuse your identity provider to log in to different applications and portals basically. And of course, because it is interacted in a standardized way, it enables you to also port your identities basically from one provider to another. So that gives you the portability of identities. In terms of extension of authorizations, we also provide within the framework the possibility of doing delegations and forming a chain of authorizations, so that you can delegate authorizations from one person to another, or one party to another, and that can continue for certain level of depth. And that is also something that you can control to some extent, of course. So that gives you the ability to delegate rights, and that allows the actual user of the data to fetch that data directly from the source. And all this is made possible to give control to the owners or the customers basically, so that whoever is the owner of the data has possibility to control what happens with their data exactly, in the manner that they think it should be, right? So, presenting to you the iSHARE legal framework, which is the framework provided in the i4Trust, and the building blocks that we are covering. So, iSHARE is a legal framework and trust framework essentially, and here you can see what roles we define in iSHARE. As you can see, data consumer and data provider are the two roles which are parties which are interested in exchange of data. And there is a data owner role, which is the data owner of the data, which wants to share some data with the consumer, and it uses the data provider to where the data is residing, and it asks the data consumer to actually get the data from the data provider. So I think in most cases this is how the data sharing would look like. But in order to enable this in a scalable way, we provide you with the framework. And as I mentioned, that we provide you with the framework where you have portable identities. So there is a role of identity provider, and the specifications of identity provider are such that all the identity providers that are recognized within a data space, can be used by any data provider to identify any particular user. And that means that data consumers or data owners can put their identities in any of the identity providers, and they can use the same identity provider to connect to all the other participants in the network. In terms of authorization registries, that is where this role defines that is where you will store the authorizations as a data owner, so that when data consumer is asking for data from data provider, the data provider can validate if this data consumer should have access to this data or not, and under what conditions. So these are that is the role that is defined in authorization registry. And in iShare, we provide the specification for how for the APIs, basically how the authorization registry interacts with the participants in the network. Again, this also gives you the portability point, because they implement the same API specifications. You can port all your authorization policies from one provider to another, and it will still work in the same manner as it is working currently. Now, key point to remember here is that these are all roles. So that doesn't mean that they have to be played by different organizations. One organization could play one or more roles in this perspective. But of course, each organization can play one single role as well. And another role that is defined, of course, in iShare is the iShare satellite, which acts as the trust anchor or trust provider services, basically. And iShare satellite is nothing but mainly a directory of all the participants within the data space, as well as so iShare satellite is based on distributed ledger technology. So it not only lists participants from your data space, but from other data spaces as well. Well, this enables you to have direct interaction with other participants from other data spaces as well in an interoperable way, because the base level of trust is always preserved irrespective of which data space that participant belongs to. There can be some additional requirements per data space which participants need to follow, but that we will see later in the trainings how that is enabled. But essentially, this the participant is added in the directory or satellite through an onboarding process, where the participants go through a signing process and onboarding process, where they agree to certain terms of use of being using this trust framework, and that gives that provides with the legal and trust basis for other participants to trust the participant, because all the participants go through the same process. Yeah. So with that, we enable cross-domain trusted data sharing, and here is just an example of multimodal value chain, which you can imagine can be made possible easily with the use of iShare. And FIWARE open source components, of course, under the i4Trust. Similar examples have already been successfully done in the previous round of the open call, and we expect now in the second round to repeat the success in different use cases that we will be supporting, basically. But here the example is about the cross domain multimodal value chain, where interaction between, as you can see, different sectors which are part of the value chain is enabled in a trusted manner. So the components that we provide under i4Trust are open source technical components provided by FIWARE. So these FIWARE components have been evolved to comply with iSHARE specifications, and these are available to you as open source components, so you can use them to kickstart your data space journey and implement these compliant components and develop your use case or your solution based on these components, so that your time to market is significantly reduced. FIWARE provides with a key component which serves both as identity provider and authorization registry role. So that's a technical component for these roles. Basically, there is also a component which provides you as a gateway to serve as PDP point, basically, which sits in front of your context broker, essentially to allow to restrict access to certain organizations only where you need to expose those data elements. Uh, So and of course, for the trust authority or trust anchor part, iShare provides the satellite component, also the technical component which you can implement in your data space. So within a data space, we expect at least one trust anchor to be operational and running, and it allows you to onboard participants for your data space. And iShare provides you with iShare satellite service component, basically, which you can deploy and act as an satellite. Why iShare? So iShare has been developed as a trust framework to address this particular issue in terms of trust, lack of trust between organizations in terms of sharing of data. That was identified as the key blocker in terms of enabling organizations to share more data, which enables a lot of new business use cases and data monetization opportunities. And with this trust framework, you enable data sovereignty, and that is essentially allows you to enable to empower the data owners to be in control of the data even after it has been shared, and that is what is covered through the legal means as well by the iShare's legal framework, which is part of the trust framework. It's a standard, if you may say, for B2B or organization to organization data sharing, and allowing you to have this interoperable cross-domain sharing of data possibilities, basically. iShare is also in collaboration with IDS, in the IDS RAM, we are making contributions in terms of how iShare framework has been defined, and IDSA components or IDSA architecture is being brought in or updated to reflect the components that are there in the framework. Similarly, we are in collaboration with Gaia X, and our collaboration is basically where we have an agreement to collaborate and align the trust frameworks of iShare and Gaia X trust framework and converge them together, along with, of course, the DSBA convergence results to explore or align the synergies between these various initiatives. The identity elements or identity aspects of iShare framework are also based on self-building block of EIDAS. So it is already compatible, or we quite are aligned with the EIDAS initiative as well. The Data Sharing Coalition has also acknowledged that iShare as a trust framework for data sharing, and all the organizations involved in Data Sharing Coalition are also following that. And of course, iShare is totally federated and encourages more parties to start data space with the basis of being federated and interoperable data spaces. Of course, it's a mature framework which has been proven and adopted across, and there are currently logistics and other data spaces which are operational, and the framework is being used by a lot of organizations in not also in logistics but also in energy, for example, and other data spaces are also being developed or are in the making, or they are almost at the near the launch of the data space, basically based on iShare framework. Some of the examples sectors that I am talking about that they are currently under development or on the verge of being live is basically in building sector or construction, in financials, in energy, and others, of course. So with this, I pass back the mic to Juanjo.
Mhm. Yes, very quickly, but I think we don't need to because okay. So you are also there. Let me again share the screen for these two slides. And we need to accelerate because we are a bit in the um, um, running out of time. Data value creation, very quickly, we are providing components that are implementing data marketplace services. So any i4Trust enabled data space will allow to instantiate data marketplace services which support the definition of offerings around data services that different participants may wish to offer, and all the mechanisms that would allow other participants to acquire access rights to use those data services and start consuming them. This is all based on the concrete open standards coming from a very reputed industry body called TM and supporting advanced pricing and revenue sharing concepts and definition of different terms and conditions, including the access policy definitions that a given data service may provide. The intention is the i4Trust framework will evolve to also incorporate integration with data publication services and data discovery brokering services. That is in the roadmap, not still available, but here we intend to follow the alignment of and support to also standards like DCAT and DCAT AP, and enabling resources that are linked to the data services that are offered in the marketplace to be available through different data publication platforms, and make those data resources available through brokering services that will be based on the use of the NGSI-LD API as well to discover those data resources. Let's talk now about data space governance. For that, I understand either you, Rajiv, or Gerard will take care, and I will be stopping, also sharing the presentation.
Yes, it didn't go well the first round, so I'll take the next round. And hi, everyone. I'm Gerard, the director of the iSHARE Foundation. And just as Juanjo mentioned, trying to keep it very short. But of course, data spaces are not only about technology. There's an important governance aspect, and that's what also the iSHARE framework brings in to data spaces to govern who are in your data space and how you agree with parties to actually work. And there are two key elements in this short update that I wanted to share. First of all, the data licenses, because of course you have the use of data is crucial to data sharing. We showed a lot about data access already, but the data usage part is covered by legal licenses that are grounded in the shared legal framework of iSHARE, which gives the conditions under which the data that you're actually sharing with other parties can be used. So you're always in control, but with legal certainty that nothing else can be done by participants on the other side with the data that you're actually sharing. It's a key element to data sharing, and that license structure is what the legal framework and the licensing library actually brings. Second aspect that is crucial that we bring also here in i4Trust with the framework is the operational agreement side. Of course, you need to make sure that that APIs work according to to your expectations, and that's not only a technical perspective; it's also service levels. So both on service level, but also on onboarding procedures and operational agreements, the legal framework really helps. But it wouldn't work if you only sign something and it's being forgotten. And that's where the core component, the iSHARE satellite that Rajiv already introduced, is the central registration component that generates that credential, so you can constantly verify whether parties are actually legally covered, technically validated, onboarded in the right procedures. And that is allowing data spaces to really keep control of the participants in their data space, but not as a silo, but as an interoperable layer, because with this we're creating legal and organizational interoperability across data spaces, and that's why i4Trust really benefits from this structure. So that's what we're bringing together, also from a technology governance perspective, and governance of the two foundations that bring i4Trust here together, FIWARE Foundation and iSHARE Foundation. We're all non-profits driving this data change in a way that you as a data space can operate in the most reliable way. Back to you again, Juanjo.
Okay, thank you, Gerard. There are a number of slides that were coming next, elaborating on the different roles that are in data spaces, but I will be skipping that because this will be actually covered in the training camp, particularly the sessions on December 21st. I want to also emphasize and recall that there is a session also elaborating on details about the trust framework that iSHARE provides on Monday, December 19th. So to be able to finish the presentation, just go through the last slide where we will be elaborating on the fact that i4Trust is going beyond the technology. I already mentioned is the combination of technology, but also involvement of digital innovation hubs and a number of initial pioneer experiments that will help to illustrate how i4Trust building blocks can be used effectively for creating data spaces. There will be a community platform around which is open to anyone that wishes to use the i4Trust framework, of course, in the first place by experiments that have been selected through the open calls, and where they will not be only able to follow on different updates of that are happening around i4Trust, but also being able to get access to the different help desk channels that the i4Trust core partners and supporting DIHs will be providing. There is a working group involving all the DIHs that have been incorporated so far to the initiative, and those DIHs will really benefit from the opportunity of getting certified as FIWARE experts and being able to evolve to become FIWARE IHAP and therefore being able to support FIWARE training and coaching services. But those DHs as well will be able to get trained on becoming eligible as iSHARE implementation partners. As I mentioned, there were a number of open calls that have been used to select pioneer use cases using the i4Trust framework. These are there is a consortium behind all those experiments involving SMEs and DIHs, and the kind of experiments we have been looking for are experiments that can really transform into real reference use cases that will stimulate that additional organizations, new organizations, new DIHs get engaged in the community and bring in and creating new data spaces around the concrete challenges they may be willing to solve, or joining existing data spaces that may have been created using i4Trust. I will skip the description of experiments. There will be a presentation and a session that we will be running today of experiments selected through the second open call. And just let me finalize with some closing remarks in this final slide. Why to join i4Trust? First of all, and very important, the level of maturity of iSHARE and FIWARE building blocks. We are talking about technologies that have been proven already in the market, that now for the first time with the i4Trust collaboration program are integrated together to solve all the needs of organizations willing to set up data spaces, and bringing as part of the ecosystems to be built all the ecosystems that are behind both organizations. When we talk about iSHARE, we are talking about more than 5,000 participants managing data, sharing data, with more than 45,000 identities sharing the data in the data spaces they are supporting to. FIWARE already involving more than 130 organization members, and a lot of individual members participating in the initiative, and with a real presence in the market with multiple product offerings based on the development of systems based on the digital twin approach. A number of components that are strategically aligned with the European Commission Digital Europe program, and very important, and we are very proud to bring to this training camp for the first time is the first available implementation of a framework that aligns with the first result of the technology convergence task force that was created under the Data Space Business Alliance. This initiative launched by the Big Data Value Association, FIWARE Foundation, GaiaX, and the International Data Space Associations, very important actors in the data space domain. And all the elements to join a community, start sharing and knowledge, best practices around those data spaces. And last but not least, with the opportunity to become FIWARE iHubs on one side, but also iSHARE partners, and leverage on all the experience of iSHARE Foundation for the creation of actual data spaces. All in all, we believe those that wish to engage to the i4Trust community, DIHs on one side, but also SMEs willing to solve concrete challenges by means of creating data spaces, will for sure be recognized as front runners of this digital revolution that data spaces will be bringing, and our cornerstone in the development of that data strategy in Europe. Thank you very much for joining this first session.